Hey everyone, I've been meaning to do a video the last couple days because Bitcoin's price has been down compared to recently, although way up over the last 6 or 12 months. But there's just been way too much going on, so I'm just getting a chance now. So let me answer a few questions. One, I'm going to go through why Bitcoin's price is doing what it's doing. Two, the historical perspective. Three, some other thoughts. And then as soon as the family calls for family time, I'll cut it off wherever that happens. So first, why is Bitcoin's price doing what it's doing? I've covered this in previous videos, but three things, right? Well, I've covered two of the three. The three things are, one, Mt. Gox, the cryptocurrency exchange in Japan that got hacked in 2014, literally 10 years ago, is finally repaying creditors about $9 billion of Bitcoin. Number two, the German government has said they're going to sell about $3 billion of Bitcoin that they seized in 2013, which is 11 years ago. Again, these are things that are left over from 10 and 11 years ago. And then just today, the Federal Reserve, the notes from the Federal Reserve meeting were released, and it indicates that they plan to keep interest rates higher for longer. So what does that mean? Well, it means a variety of things. One, there's going to be some selling pressure on Bitcoin from Mt. Gox and from the German government, and there will be less liquidity in the marketplace as the Federal Reserve sucks U.S. dollars out of the economy by continuing to offer 5.5% interest if you will park your money at the Federal Reserve, which then, of course, translates into certificates of deposit and interest rates at banks and things like that. So the Federal Reserve is still concerned about inflation, which they caused, and they're trying to remedy it by essentially paying you a huge interest rate in order to keep your money on the sidelines, which is part of how they do that, which is with interest rates. So will the combination of Mt. Gox, the German government, and higher interest rates for longer, that does have a negative near-term impact on Bitcoin. Okay, which means right now Bitcoin's trading at 56,500 or so. All right, but let's zoom out. What is the downside is near-term selling pressure, which pushes the price of any asset down. Here's the upside. The upside is we are now eliminating two massive known unknowns. You have, in business, you have, known unknowns and you have unknown unknowns. Well, known unknowns is, hey, at some point, the Mt. Gox creditors are going to get paid. And at some point, the German government is going to dump this Bitcoin that they seized in 2013. So it's known, but it's unknown when they're going to do it. And now those known unknowns have become, known knowns, right? We now know when they're going to do it. It's going to be over, either the recent past or over at most the next 90 days. So there's a huge upside to that because for the last 10 or 11 years, there has been certain people sitting on the sidelines saying, hey, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin now because what happens when the Mt. Gox creditors get their payment back? And so as we eliminate those unknowns, meaning as the Mt. Gox creditors do get their payments back and as the German government liquidates this, that is now uncertainty that has been removed from the market. We don't have to worry about those events happening again. And then third, with regard to the Federal Reserve, again, who really thinks that the Federal Reserve is suddenly going to be consistently responsible for here on out? That has never happened in all of human history. It certainly never happened with the Federal Reserve. And they're basically just going to drop interest rates as soon as something breaks. It is shocking that as indebted as the world is right now, and how many people have credit card debt, how many people are borrowing against their 401k, second mortgages on their homes. Like nothing in the economy makes sense right now, but it hasn't completely started breaking down yet. Or I should say it started breaking down, but it hasn't really broken yet. And as soon as it does break, the one tool that the Federal Reserve has is to immediately drop interest rates and flood the economy with free money and hope that that sort of washes the problems away. Of course, it never does. You get a big recession and then it just takes, multiple years for it, lots of pain by lots of people, and then it turns around. But anyway, getting those things out of the way, the first two especially, is a big deal because that is uncertainty. We only have to deal with the Mt. Gox creditors dumping their Bitcoin one time. And so once they're finally done doing it, that is something we don't have to worry about anymore. Okay, so that's a few thoughts on that. Let me sort of part two of this deal is, let me zoom out. Okay, so if you zoom out, is it normal to have pullbacks? I think the lowest it got to yesterday or today was 27% from the all-time high. So are 27% drawdowns an anomaly? And the answer is no. In Bitcoin bull cycles, meaning up cycles, you've had, regular pullbacks of 25, 30, even in earlier cycles as high as 38 or 40%. as time has gone on, those drawdowns have gotten smaller and less frequent, which happens with any asset as it stabilizes. And so anyway, somebody asked me today, because I posted a picture about the various drawdowns over time, and they said, yeah, but if you zoom out, haven't there been really much larger drawdowns over time? And the answer is yes, but not at the stage of the Bitcoin adoption we're at in the adoption cycle. So, for example, let's assume the broad stock market, these numbers are not exact, but let's assume the broad stock market crashes by 50% about every 10 years. Again, that's not exact, but it's, ballpark. Okay, so if somebody said, but wait a second, it's only down 20%, why would it not crash 50%? Let's say, we had a crash in 2008, and let's say we're sitting in 2013. And if somebody said, and I would say in 2013, a 20% pullback is a big pullback for the broad stock market in 2013. Well, somebody could certainly come along and say, why are you saying 20% is a big pullback? Because the stock market crashes 50%. And I would say, yeah, but it doesn't crash 50% between cycles. And the reason for that is the only way you can get a crash as big as 50% is if you're coming down from euphoric new all-time highs. So is it possible that the stock market can crash 50% from where it is now? Yes. Is it possible it could crash 50% from where it was in 2013? No, that's basically impossible, because in 2013 it was barely higher than it was in 2007. You're just not going to get a crash like that sort of mid-cycle. So Bitcoin operates the same way, except on a 4-year cycle. And so you had 2011, 12, and 13 were up years. 14 was a down year. 15, 16, 17 were up years. 18 was a down year. 19, 20, and 21 were up years. 22 was a down year. 23 and 24 been huge up years. I would anticipate that would continue. 25 is an up year. We'll probably get a downturn in 2026. Now, in each of those cycles, I've walked you through those 4-year cycles. There's been about 4 of them. The largest drawdown in the first cycle was 94%, which is pretty brutal, similar to Amazon. Amazon's very first large drawdown was 94%. So Bitcoin's first big price correction was 94%. Amazon's first big price correction was 94%. Bitcoin's second big price correction, again, these were the early days of Bitcoin, was 93%. And again, if you look at other assets like Netflix had 2 price corrections of greater than 80%, for example. So Bitcoin's biggest price correction was 94%, second biggest was 93%. The next price correction was 84%, and the most recent in 2022 was 78%. So again, you could ask, why do I think a 27% price correction is pretty big, and why is it a great buying opportunity? And the answer is because we barely touched the previous all-time high. We're not coming off euphoric 2025 prices of 200,000 a coin. And if we were sitting at 200,000 a coin and the price correction was 27%, I would say, yeah, it's probably going to go lower, because a 27% price correction off of 200 grand when the previous all-time high, was 69,000, and the all-time high this cycle is, 120, 160, 200,000, who knows what it's going to be. But yeah, coming off something like that, I think it's highly unlikely it'll be a 78% price correction, because that was before the Bitcoin ETFs, and having an ETF with that much liquidity and, buying and selling pressure in the market really does a lot for a market. So I think it's probably, if somebody said sort of what's the over under, I would say, 50% price correction. But I think we get a 50% price correction off of a number that's, let's call it 160,000. Well, that still results in the lowest price it ever gets in 2026 being 80,000, which is higher than the price it's ever been. So if somebody said, well, should I buy it now or wait for the big 2026 price correction? I would say, well, first, you're going to have to time the 2026 price correction perfectly, which no one ever does. And 2, the best price you're probably ever going to get in 2026 is maybe 80,000. Again, I don't know, but I'm just saying you're probably not going to get a correction bigger than maybe 50%. Maybe 60% max, because again, every time it's come down 93%, 84%, 78% price correction, it's like the next price correction is probably no more than 50 or 60%. And that's probably only possible coming off an absolutely insane 2025 euphoric high where the price, goes parabolic and goes, to complete insanity. And then it comes 50%, 60% off that. And again, I think that price is going to be significantly higher than it is now, which makes sense to buy it now. So the image I posted is from 2016 and 2017, which from a pattern perspective is the closest to what we're experiencing now. For a variety of reasons in 2020 and 2021, which was the more recent cycle, there was some anomalies in there related to the China's ban of Bitcoin, which they later partially reversed, I guess to some degree, with allowing people to buy Bitcoin in Hong Kong and things like that. But anyway, that resulted in a sort of an anomaly in that cycle as compared to the farther back ones. So the 2016, 2017 is just an easier cycle where it's cleaner to look at the ups and downs. But anyway, so all that to say, I think if you're looking at what are the biggest price drawdowns that could be expected in 2024, I would say the years to look at are 2016. It'd be the halving years, right? Because 2024 is the halving year where the supply of Bitcoin dropped in half. So those years would be 2012, 2016, and 2020. And so if you look at those years, 2016, 2017 should be the corollary for 2024, 2025. You see big drawdowns of 25% or more. Again, I think over time that those drawdowns get a lot smaller, but they're there for the time being. Anyway, so all that to say, the image I posted was of a specific time period in the Bitcoin cycle that correlates to the time period where we are in right now. That doesn't mean I don't think we'll get bigger drawdowns. I just don't think we'll get bigger drawdowns where we are in the cycle, and in a cycle where we've barely hit highs that were higher than in 2021, which just, again, tells me we're early in that cycle. So a few thoughts on that. I think it's a fantastic time to buy Bitcoin. I continue to believe that. Also, I wanted to update you on sort of my own Bitcoin buying plans. So back when the price dropped from $64,500 to $60,500, which is about a $4,000 drop, I said in one of my last couple videos that I got about 50% of the way to buying some more Bitcoin. So as the price has dropped down to 50 right now, because obviously as the price of Bitcoin drops, that also means the percentage of my total assets that are in Bitcoin also drops because the other assets, have stayed more or less in the same ballpark. So what that means, if I want to keep my percentage of liquid net worth that's in Bitcoin at 96%, I can put some additional US dollars into Bitcoin to get it back to 96%, even at a lower price, which means if the price gets back to 65,000 a coin, that means the price will probably then bump up the percentage will bump from like 96% to 97%. So I started that process. I logged into Fidelity, their net benefits thing from the 401k from 10 years ago. And I started poking around and trying to figure out if there's some way to convert this old, low single digit percent of my net worth, old 401k to Bitcoin. I went and looked through all the investment options they had. There's like 20 of them. Bitcoin's not part of any of those. So I looked through all those investment options just to see if they'd give me an easy way to do it. They're not going to give me an easy way to do it. So the next step is I got to either do the chat in the app on their net benefits app for Fidelity, or I've got to call them and say, hey, I've got this 401k left over from 10 years ago. What is the least painful way of converting part of this or even all of this to Bitcoin? So that's just a painful process. I did not have time to call them. I did not have time to, do their chat service. But anyway, so one place to get a little bit more US dollar cash is that old 401k from 10 years ago. Again, there's not much in there, but it buys some Bitcoin. So I started the process of trying to figure out how do I get liquidity on some of that. I still don't want to go through the painful process of going and rounding up the gold from where the various places is stored, this little bit of gold I have left over from years and years back. And that's probably, given that it's it's the least liquid of the other things. And so anyway, my plan is to update my spreadsheet, see if I can break loose some of that 4% that's not in Bitcoin and allocate it to Bitcoin. But I got to see what those percentages look like. So I'm in the process of doing that. I'm in the process of trying to break loose some cash from this 10-year-old 401k. And I don't know when I'm going to finalize that. So anyway, the short take is the current price has sort of jumped me from I have enough Bitcoin, I'm good where I am, to I'm going to buy a little more Bitcoin. The question is, how painful is it, and what is the price of Bitcoin by the time I go through that pain? If I'm going to go through the pain, then at some point I'm just going to buy it at whatever price it is, because you can't time the market anyway. But if I wake up tomorrow and the price is above 60,000, I'm probably going to say, screw it. I'm not going to jump through all the hoops to try to free up another 1% of my entire, of my net worth so I can take my Bitcoin allocation from 96% to 97%. I'm not going to do that if I have to drive all the way to some bullion dealer in Texas to try to get some liquidity on some gold, and I'm not going to do that if it ends up spending half of a day on, I don't know, maybe it's probably worth it to jump through the hoops with Fidelity to try to get a little bit of liquidity on that old 401k. But it's just a pain. Like, it's all on autopilot right now from 10 years. It's sat there untouched for 10 years. And now I got to go figure out how to move it and figure out how do I, untether it from Beyond Trust, which is still the custodian, and how do I self-manage a 401k? I've never gone through that process. So, anyway, so all that to say, the price has sort of shaken me loose from I have enough Bitcoin to I'm going to buy some more Bitcoin if I can reasonably figure out how to do that in a way that's not too painful. Then I'll buy another. My plan is to take of the 4% of my liquid net worth that's not in Bitcoin. If I can get some liquidity on that, my plan is to take like a quarter of that and dump it in. And then that way, when Bitcoin's back at 65,000 a coin, I'll be 97% of my liquid net worth in Bitcoin rather than 96%. I know it doesn't sound like much, but it's, again, I stare down at my watch. I'm like, $56,000 Bitcoin. Come on, people. Like, if you're going to sell me $56,000 Bitcoin, like, okay, I'll go jump through the hoops to take your $56,000 Bitcoin because, my gosh, like, who on earth is parting with $56,000 Bitcoin? Like, what alternate reality do we live in? This makes no sense. But anyway, if somebody wants to part with it, at some point, somebody has to buy it. So anyway, hopefully if I can jump through the hoops, that will be me. So let me summarize. Where does that leave us? The stuff with Mt. Gox and with the German government is temporary. Once we get through it, it'll be uncertainty that has been removed from the market, which is a good thing. The Federal Reserve at some point will drop interest rates as soon as the economy starts to break, which it will because they've totally screwed it up with a decade of free money and then suddenly jacking up epically high interest rates. And you can't do a whipsaw like that without breaking the neck of the patient, which happens about every 10 years when we get recession. So they're going to give the patient whiplash, which is the U.S. economy. I think the patient already has whiplash. They just don't know it yet. But, that'll happen. So, the Fed's going to drop interest rates as soon as the proverbial crap hits the fan. The crap is like headed toward the blades of the fan, but it hasn't made quite full contact yet. So as soon as the crap hits the fan and, massive unsustainable debt levels become unaffordable at 5.5%, interest. And, when the crap really hits the fan, the interest rates will come down because they always do. And, that will make a bunch of people way less excited about parking their money for 5.25% interest at their bank when suddenly that interest rate disappears. So anyway, these are, unknowns that will go away and have been hanging out there for a decade. And the people that have been not buying Bitcoin because they've been waiting for the Mt. Gox creditors to clear, well, they won't have that excuse anymore. Let's see. So that's we're getting that out of the way. Fantastic time to buy. I mean, if somebody said, is this as low as Bitcoin can go at this stage in the cycle? I would say yes. I could be wrong. I don't know. Nobody knows, but it sure feels like, I'll put it this way. It feels very much like after the Bitcoin ETF launched and the night before it was 46,700. And then the price came down over the next month to 38,500. And somewhere in there, 39,000, I posted on Facebook that, hey, I think now's a really good time to buy. Like this just, we've reached the point in the cycle where the price does not make sense as compared to the news. So it feels that way right now at, 56,000, and it even dipped a little lower than that earlier today. At 56,000, it feels like, come on, people. Like the Bitcoin ETFs are still buying. We're in the bull market part of the cycle. Bitcoin adoption is going, marching forward worldwide. Positive news stories every single day on Bitcoin. And we're seriously sitting at 56,000. It feels, again, like it did at, 38,500. It's just like, back in, I guess that would have been, late January, early February. It feels like, yeah, this price does not make sense as compared to the positive news out there. So what happens when the price doesn't make sense? Well, at some point, like a rubber band, the price eventually snaps up to something that makes more sense. So that's what it feels like. So I think, it feels like the price has bottomed at this stage in the cycle. And at some point it'll rip higher, as it always does. But I don't know. The future's uncertain. And I'll remind you, Michael Saylor, the founder and CEO of MicroStrategy, who just bought $800 million of additional Bitcoin. His company's already sitting on $15 billion. So one company owns more Bitcoin than the German government and Mt. Gox combined. And so he bought an extra $800 million of Bitcoin at 65,800, which is more than $10,000 per coin higher than the price right now. If there was a single human in the entire planet that knows the cell phone number of every insider that could tell you everything there is to know about Bitcoin, how's it going to go up? Why is it going to go up? Which whales are selling? Which whales are buying? If there was one person on the entire planet that could predict that and has access to all the people who could predict that, it's Michael Saylor. And of course, he doesn't even have access to it. So he gets $800 million 3 weeks ago, and he buys $800 million, more than $750 million of Bitcoin over the weekend, about 3 weeks ago. And he buys it at an average price of 65,800. So could he have waited 2 or 3 weeks and bought it for 10,000 a coin less? Yes. But he's also smart enough to know that he doesn't know that. You don't know that. I don't know that. Nobody knows where it's going other than in the long term it goes up. And he looks at it and is like, hey, I can buy $800,000 of Bitcoin for 65,800, or I can risk missing out on it by sitting on it. And he's smart enough to know that you're an idiot if you just sit on US dollar cash waiting for some other asset to go down, because it usually doesn't go down. And if it does go down, how much does it have to go down before you pull the trigger? Well, everybody thinks they'll know, they'll feel a certain feeling and it'll tell them to buy, and they just never buy. Well, he's smart enough to know that if you wait around for a lower price, you'll be waiting forever. And that's why a bunch of people, in fact, I'll throw in a couple notes. So last night in my queue for audio content, I use this app called VoiceDream, and I just queue it up with all sorts of content, PowerPoint, Word documents, articles off the internet, and then my phone just reads them to me in a really good but still computerized voice. But anyway, I had queued up a bunch of content from between 2011 and 2013, and I thought it was fascinating to read articles, or in this case, listen to articles that are in written form, but I'm listening to them, back from 2011 to 2013, because it's all the same people saying all the same thing, except the price was between $60 and $140. So these articles were all in the $60 to $140 price per Bitcoin, as opposed to $56,000 per Bitcoin. And everybody is saying all the same things, like, hey, the price dropped to 80,000. How low can it go? Only suckers are buying Bitcoin at $80, $80 a coin. The smart people are all waiting for $40 Bitcoin. Like, you basically remove 3 zeros from today's price. The whole thing is Bitcoin's at, in the ballpark of 1/1000th of its current price. And everybody is having the exact same debate that they're having right now. If it's now a good time to buy, and no, I'm sitting on it, and I'm only going to buy when it goes down to a certain price. And of course, then it goes through the moon and they all miss out. And there's all these people waiting to buy their $40 Bitcoin. They could have bought as much as they wanted at $60, but they were waiting for $40. And so, well, they never got their $40 of Bitcoin, and they never will. So could have made 1,000 times their money. Instead of 1,000 times their money, they made nothing, because they're still waiting for $40 Bitcoin. That will never happen. So my advice is always the same. Buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can. You can't time the market. I can't time the market. That being said, we're kind of in a dip right now. So sounds like a fantastic time to buy. It just seems like a fantastic time to buy based on my 7 years of experience back from 2017 to the present, watching, the prices go up and down and all that sort of stuff. Seems like a fantastic time to buy. And, the things that are suppressing the price right now, first of all, they all seem baked in. Like, who on the planet at this point that's watching Bitcoin hadn't figured out that Mt. Gox and the German government, you just Google it and it's right there. So as soon as that stuff starts to happen and people realize it's not as big a deal as everyone thought, then, suddenly everybody goes crazy and they buy back the Bitcoin they were selling, and, fear, uncertainty, and doubt has been removed and all that. So anyway, in the grand scheme, everything's right on track. It's just Bitcoin's requiring everybody to be a little more patient than they want to be. And that applies to everybody, including me. And if you're thinking, hey, I'll bet Joel's been in it so long that it doesn't even faze him when the price is down, I would say mostly that's true. But I would say, as compared to people freaking out right now, I'm maybe 1% of that. And I'm 0 on the freak out scale, but on the does it hurt when your entire net worth drops by 10%? Yeah, that's kind of painful. you're going around town, and even if you're buying stuff with Bitcoin that you bought for half the price, it's like, yeah, but man, my total net worth is like down by 10% over the last few weeks. Because, when you got 96% of your assets in Bitcoin and it drops by 10 or, 11 or 12%, well, you feel about 10% poorer in your entire net worth. So yeah, I would say on the freak out scale, 0, but on the, is it uncomfortable when an asset you own a huge amount of drops? Yes, it's uncomfortable. And I have the same feelings that anyone has when they watch an asset, which is, do I still own some Bitcoin I bought at 68,000 a coin that is down by 12,000 a coin? Yes. Do I still own a bunch of Bitcoin, way more Bitcoin that I bought for, prices that less than half the current price? Yes, I also do own that. So yeah, does it feel great to be sitting on some Bitcoin, even if it's a very small percent of the total I own that was bought at 68,000 when the price is 56? Yeah, it's a little bit painful. But as compared to what it used to feel like, it's a tiny fraction of what it used to feel like with these price swings. Well, one, the price swings used to be way higher than they are now. And two, once you've been through a bunch of them, at some point, it's like, oh, whatever. We've been here before. I've seen this movie before. It's like, it's just, I've seen this movie before. And what happens? Well, you got to be patient. And basically, as soon as the very last person who couldn't be patient gets washed out and they sell and they're wringing their hands and they're sure that they're done, when the very last person gets washed out, well, then Bitcoin shoots for the moon and people are all lamenting how they missed out and they sold their Bitcoin and they shouldn't have sold their Bitcoin. And, and it's like, I've just seen this over and over and over. So am I selling? No. Does it still hurt a little bit when your net worth drops by 10%? Sure. It's a bit painful. I would love to use my Coinbase debit card to buy things when I'm buying things with Bitcoin that is triple the price that I paid for it, instead of when I'm buying things for only double the price I paid for it. Or, obviously I have some Bitcoin that's like up 10x, but, a very small percent of the Bitcoin I own was bought for, I think the cheapest I ever bought a Bitcoin was 6,400. So very little of the Bitcoin I bought was that cheap. And obviously that is still up whatever 9x or something like that. But yeah, whatever my blended cost adjusted basis of Bitcoin is, I'd much rather spend Bitcoin when it's triple that rather than when it's double that. And if it goes down even more when it's 1.5x that or whatever it is. But anyway, I think we're in a great spot. Hurts a little for the price to be down. It is a buying opportunity. I don't know. Maybe Bitcoin's waiting for me. Maybe as soon as I get that additional 1% of my entire net worth in Bitcoin, maybe as soon as that, hits my Coinbase account and magically turns into Bitcoin, maybe then it'll, shoot for the stars. I don't know. But I'll try to figure it out. If I can free up a little liquidity, I will, because, $56,000 Bitcoin is not only tempting, it's like, yeah, I want to pull the trigger at that price. I just got to find liquidity for assets that are tough to find liquidity on. So anyway, so that's the update. That's where I am. Is anything wrong with Bitcoin? No. Should you buy as much Bitcoin as you possibly can at these prices? Yes. And when Bitcoin is above 100,000 a coin, are you even going to remember whether you bought it at 56 or 73 or 68? And the answer is no. I can't remember in the early days of buying Bitcoin. I don't remember the Bitcoin I bought at 9,400 versus 12,000 versus 6,400. All I know is I bought a fair amount of Bitcoin back when it was 2017 and 2018 prices. That's all I remember. I don't even remember the exact prices. What I do know is that I would wish I had bought way more back then. Even at the worst price of 2017 or 2018, if I could have the worst price of 2018, meaning the highest price of the whole year of 2018, 19, or 20, yes, I would buy as much Bitcoin as I could possibly get my hands on at the highest possible price in 2018, 19, or 20 as compared to the amount I actually did buy back then. Because the price I had to pay in 2021, 2, and 2023, and 2024 were all prices higher than I could have bought it in 2018, 2019, or 2020. So what do I wish I had done? Well, exactly what you should do now, which is buy probably a lot more Bitcoin than you already have, unless you're already at 100%. And a couple people have messaged me and were like, hey, I've bought a lot more Bitcoin and I'm super maxed, including one person who was like, hey, I'm at 100%. So good for you. That's fantastic. My belief is you'll be richly rewarded for that level of courage and you will be a legend. But most people are sitting at 5% or 1% or 10% or 2%. And if you're way down there, it just seems like a blatantly obvious buying opportunity to me. But that's just my 2 cents. So, as always, none of this is tax advice or financial advice or accounting advice. I am not a professional. I am not certified in any of those. I am just, a casual retail investor that's been investing my own funds and been an investor in and following Bitcoin since 2017. And happy to help you on your journey, because I think all the other assets other than Bitcoin that you could invest in right now are massively overvalued. And therefore, I think Bitcoin is the one thing that I think I can confidently recommend people invest in right now, because it's the one thing that I think is going to go way, way, way higher than it is today. So hope all this helps on your Bitcoin journey. As always, have a good night.